Zimbabwe, the family of Robert Mugabe await his burial. His nephew has disclosed that the former president did not own his mansion known as the Blue Roof. Mugabe's body is being kept at the 25-bedroom mansion, apparently registered to a company linked to Zanu-PF. To discuss this and other matters concerning Zimbabwe, we joined in the studio by Dr Daniel Shumba of the United Democratic Alliance. He's the president. He's also a businessman. A very good evening to you, Dr. Shumba. Thanks for joining us.
Good evening, Superstar.
Perhaps let's just start with this fact that President Robert Mugabe is awaiting burial, and there's the issue that this is going to be done at Heroes Acre. Despite lots of, should I say, debate around this very issue of his burial, his funeral, what did you make of that?
Obviously, it's sad, and my condolences to the family. The sad thing is that the passing on of Zimbabwe's founding father, President Robert Mugabe, has been used by Zanu-PF to the men to try and recover some mileage by trying to posture ahead of the family. But fortunately, the family has stood its ground, and they've reached some sort of fair compromise with the
It sounds almost strange even to say a fair compromise on the burial of your loved one, who has, according to reports, left strict instructions on where and when. Why should it even come to that?
I think those are issues that are really up to the family, because they were given the instructions. We really don't know the instructions that were given, but I believe that the family ought to finally give the final decision.
But I'm asking, why should it come to that on the part of the government? Is it not only natural to respect the wishes of the deceased and the deceased family and loved ones? Yeah,
but the nature of the Zanu-PF government has always been to bamboozle and have its wish. And so it's disrespectful, and clearly they should respect the wishes of the family. It's unfortunate that there's been a lot of jostling about the issue.
So I mentioned this latest report that is coming out about the house, the Blue Roof, that President Mugabe lived in during his presidential tenure. The nephew is saying that he never owned that house. What does it mean in the bigger scheme of things? And I ask this because
it tells you a number of things. There were obviously administrative lapses to those that ought to have ensured that the properties were in the appropriate names as desired by the one that owed the properties, in this case, President Robert Mugabe. So,
but there's rumor that, or not even rumor, that the reports, even I understood some attributed to former Minister Patrick Chinamasa, that it is indeed owned by Zanu-PF. And I'm asking you this, in the greater, bigger scheme of things, what does it say about the narrative that you had this large living autocrat who died in Singapore? Does that turn it on its head?
Yes, it's unfortunate that President Mugabe had to pass on while in exile. It was unfortunate that a lot of pressure, innuendos, and a number of issues that Zanu-PF ought to have done to honor its founding president didn't do. It's now appearing right through to his home. And I think with the respect of the man, the government ought to step back, allow the properties to be given to the family, and let the family run its affairs as they wish.
So you do agree with the notion that he died in exile, as opposed to some saying that he died living lavishly in Singapore?
No, he wasn't living lavishly. His nephew, the former Minister Chidakwa, gave an eulogy of this issue on Saturday, and he died a bitter man. And there were reasons for that, because all this is a consequence of the coup that was perpetuated in November of 2017, which largely Zanu-PF has refused to acknowledge and to bring closure to the dictates that have led to a stolen election in 2018 and the autocratic and the brutal nature of the current regime.
So we've been talking all this time since we heard the news of his passing last week, Friday, of the legacy of President Robert Mugabe. Obviously, checkered depending from the prism from which it's told. But does it provide for room to introspect or even to bring to light what are the real reasons behind the fallout? What really did the life that President Robert Mugabe live in his final years? Will it change understanding of his legacy?
It does influence those that have got obviously a motivation to try and downplay or even distort. President Robert Mugabe stood as an icon, as a Pan-Africanist, as a nationalist, and the way issues emanating to the various negotiations, the Geneva and Lancaster House negotiations that led to the elections, ushering in a new dispensation. Others were desirous to, get into power, and such as the unorthodox manner which President Mnangagwa used with his cronies. So they will seek to amplify that so that they can be put in the armpits and get some credibility. But besides being an icon, his legacy was not necessarily underpinned by a smooth sailing performance. There were dotted spots and very sad moments that happened to Zimbabwe under his watch, such as the Gukura Hundi, there were Mramba Trinas, and the demise of a number of people that have complaints. I'm a former Politburo member of Zanu-PF, and it's known that I took exception to some of those things, but clearly his legacy cannot be watered down. He was an international statesman of note. Both in his understanding of the global issues, African ethos, and the Zimbabwe agenda.
So the importance of him being buried at Heroes Acre vis-a-vis his hometown of Katumba, what is the narrative there? What should we read into it? And is there anything to read into?
Obviously, if he's buried at the Heroes Acre, that is considered the place where the heroes would go. But of course, Zanu-PF would want to get mileage from it because they own the process and they want to maximize on it to show that they are united. There were clearly people that were purged as a consequence of that coup, and it's undeniable that they are not able to solve that by simply bulldozing the family to give their own desired burial place.
So just coming to the now and the here that is being in South Africa and the attacks that we've seen against properties of foreign nationals, in some cases against foreign nationals themselves. And Zimbabweans obviously were affected. We've seen some being repatriated back home to Zimbabwe. What are your thoughts on the next steps that should be taken diplomatically to resolve this issue?
The happenings are very painful, very unfortunate, and targeting innocent foreigners who are here for different reasons. Unfortunately, among them, you will get criminals that rightly the South African as a state has a right to target in order to ensure that there's smooth sailing constitutional conduct of foreigners in its jurisdiction. I'll speak specifically to Zimbabweans who are here. I think the leaders of the region ought to come together and have a discussion that moves the narrative to a different level. Why do we have such numbers moving into the other economies? South Africa is the biggest economy in the continent.
What is your reasoning? Why do we see that huge influx of...
It's misgovernance. I mean, there's been brutal leadership, demise of the livelihoods of people. The economy has collapsed. There are pseudo-currencies that are pronounced every 2-3 months. There's a parallel market. People can't afford life. And so naturally, people move to better economies. The other is the brutal nature of government. People are arrested willy-nilly, disregard of human rights, and all that contributory effect. So what should happen is that the leaders must come together and say what is it in those jurisdictions that ought to be corrected, to ensure that what you have is a natural cross-pollination of societies coming for either economic reasons, out of choice, not out of need to vacate a given jurisdiction.
Does language play a role in where people choose to go?
Indeed. You will look at the sub-region, for instance, Zimbabwe, South Africa, Botswana, Namibia, Malawi, Zambia. These are predominantly English-speaking nations. And as a consequence, it's easier for people to come and function here, either as technocrats or as business people or even as immigrants, to integrate with the societies here. So that does play a part. But it doesn't take away the national responsibility of governments to ensure that their own jurisdictions are preferred destinations for their own citizens.
All right, thank you so much for your time and insights. Really appreciate it. Dr. Daniel Shumba, he is president of the United Democratic Alliance and a businessman. Nzinga?
Thank you.